Doing the gray rock, basically, like John likes to say, is you are being as dull as a rock on the ground. Who in the world would argue with a rock?
Right. You remember, and that's a great point, because if you can remember that when they're going after you, when they're trying to push your buttons, when they're trying to trigger you, remember, you can't argue with a rock. What is the gray rock method, and when to use it and when not to use it?
Now, the gray rock method is a coping mechanism. It is not a cure for the relationship to get better. It's not a cure for the narcissist. It's not a fix. It's a way for you as the victim to retain your sanity during an abusive relationship. This is what you would use in order to decide whether or not you want to continue your life in this abusive relationship, or you want to plan a safe exit strategy to leave it. It will not fix the relationship.
Right.
And if your partner is a narcissist, it will not change. It will only get worse.
Right. I know you always tell your clients this is a short-term tactic.
Yes.
It's not a long-term fix.
Right.
So, in your experience when you were in your narcissistic abusive relationship, which was horrible, guys, if you knew the whole story, when did you ever use the gray rock method as in an advantage?
Well,
What really helped you?
He would bait me. Okay. So if you don't know what baiting means, it literally means trying to trip you up into a situation when you're trying to remain composed, you're trying to keep your emotions intact, and they just keep chipping away at things they know are going to upset you.
Well, they know your buttons.
They do.
Absolutely do.
Oh
right?
my God, they know how to pour salt in your wounds,
Right,
big
right.
time. So he would bait me on things, and I would really try to hold that temper in. Sometimes it would get the best of me, but when I started understanding the gray rock method,
Right.
I started basically ignoring what he was saying. I would answer him with one word answers, a nod, maybe just a look, a shrug. So when he kept on and on, I would just say, okay, or no, or I'm not going to deal with this right now. And I would just walk away. Now, they will continue to try to bait you. So you have to remember in your mind what they're trying to do. They are trying to get an emotional rush out of you. It's how they feed their being, because they can't really produce their own emotions. They have to suck them out of you. So you have to recognize what they're trying to do. And when you're doing the gray rock, basically, like John likes to say, is you are being as dull as a rock on the ground. Who in the world would argue with a rock?
Right. You remember, and that's a great point, because if you can remember that when they're going after you, when they're trying to push your buttons, when they're trying to trigger you, remember, you can't argue with a rock.
Absolutely.
Think about if you had a rock in front of you and you're yelling at the rock, you're getting no response.
No.
So try to envision that when you're using the gray rock method, you're just being a rock.
Yeah.
You're just being very non-committal, non-emotional,
You're
and unresponsible.
and
Unresponsible.
uninteresting too.
Right.
The whole thing about a narcissist is they want to provoke you.
Right.
They want that. So if you become uninteresting to them and they're not going to get that reaction out of you, they are going to eventually give up. Now, I'm not saying that they won't come back at you. That's why this is just a very short-term coping mechanism only, just so you can keep your sanity, you can start thinking clearly, and you can make an educated decision as to whether or not you're willing to live your life like this, or much, much worse, or you're ready to plan how to get out.
So let's talk about when are the best times to use gray rock, and then when is it not appropriate to use gray rock?
If your abuser is prone to violence, this may provoke them.
Right.
So we want to put that warning out there. Narcissists can be violent, or they don't have to be violent, but they're still very dangerous mentally, physically, emotionally, financially.
Right.
So when you are using this coping mechanism for yourself to keep calm inside, to not allow them to provoke an emotional outburst from you, that is when you use it. If they are prone to violence, you are going to have to make that judgment, because if they are reactionary and they're violent, this may not be a method that you want to use. Honestly, that is a relationship you've got to get out of. But, we'll cover that in future podcasts. But that's when not to use the
Right.
gray rock and not to use it as a long-term method. I have clients that have used the gray rock method for like 2 years. Can you imagine being a rock in your relationship for 2 years? That's not healthy. This is a short-term coping mechanism. The long-term goal is to get out.
I'm so glad you brought that up. That was my mistake.
Most of our mistakes.
Yeah, most of our mistake. What I did before I was ready is I told my abuser that I think we need to get a divorce. I'm going to go ahead and file for divorce. That was the worst thing because I wasn't prepared. I didn't have everything in order, credit cards, my emergency fund. I didn't have all the
Credit
things.
frozen.
My credit frozen, all the things that you need to do before you leave, before you say you're going to leave.
Right.
And then guess what happened? I came home from work one day and my house was completely empty.
And she used his credit cards to move everything
to pay for the movers, thousands of dollars.
But that is really sad.
It was horrible. It was just horrible to come home to a completely vacant house. Now, that was my fault because I told her what I was going to do.
He gave her his playbook.
Right.
You never give that to the enemy team.
And guess what else started when I mentioned that? She told everybody that I was physically abusing her, which is a horrible thing to go through for a man. But what happens is then your support group distances themselves from you.
Yeah.
So you don't have people to talk to and confide in and all that. So
and you're in an emotional tizzy. See,
Right.
you're not thinking clearly in order to make that list
Right.
of what you should do before you leave.
Right. So it's just got some great ideas on there, like checking for tracking devices on your phone and your car so that when you leave, you can leave safely. But the really important thing about this list is that it puts you in a good place so that when you do leave, you don't have to go back. And that's what happens over 50% of the time when people leave. They end up having to go back because they weren't prepared.
Right.
They didn't have their ducks in a row so that they have to go back. And then
financially desperate to go back because they haven't done the financial steps that are in the 12 critical steps.
So it gets really desperate at that point because your abuser is even more controlling and it is even harder to leave the next time. So you want to make sure you're leaving. So check out, I'm going to put the link below for the 12 critical steps to take before you leave webinar. It's on our website, the v2w.com, and I'll put that link below too.